Izanagi is easily the most complicated goddess in the game. Like sometimes I set a disclaimer, like with Hades, I was just like disclaimer. But if you're gonna play Hades, he takes forever. I need to like set a disclaimer here. Izanagi is by far the goddess that I understand the least. Even after going through campaign mode with her, if you ask me like which do I understand better, like Izanagi or Four, I'd just be like, yeah, Izanagi easily. I understand her the least. It's not even close. She has some seriously complicated mechanics. She forces you to make very hard decisions almost every turn. Like you really need to like switch on. You know what I mean? Like you really need to concentrate and think things through. Because the way that Izanagi works is she has the ability, if she really wants to, on turn one, to win a race. Always. Like, even in insane mode, where they get bonus devotion, if Izanagi decides that she wants to, put down a board that's stronger than yours turn one, she can do that. But the cycle of life that's kind of true for, like, most, I mean, just about every single, card in the game, where, like, you invest in a card. So you invest in a permanent, you put the permanent down for a certain devotion cost. That permanent will then start paying you back the investment you put into it. So, it's this loop where you invest and then the card pays you back. And parts of the game are based around, okay, if I play this card, you know, what is the reasonable expectation I can get from it? Like, can I destroy a certain amount of my opponent's devotion's worth of cards? What's it going to achieve for me? Like, this is normally why I talk about, like, Mummy, where I'm like, oh, like, it's got plus EV. Like, it costs 4 devotion, but it costs more for your opponent to destroy than that. Almost always, it will cost more than 4 devotion for your opponent to destroy it. With Izanagi, this cycle of life is like times 10, because she literally has to make decisions about what her best option is from turn to turn. She makes decisions about what her best option is, and then she burns the other options. It's like walking on a knife edge. Like I said it so many times in the campaign, whereas like this feels like so tenuous. It feels like if you can like just navigate this super thin line of like perfect play, like she just has like such a massive advantage over other goddesses. Yeah, like she is easily a top tier goddess, but she's also so difficult to play that if you get this wrong, she just falls off a cliff. Like that's it, the match is over. You've just screwed yourself so bad, because she has to burn options. If you burn the wrong thing and you suddenly find yourself in a situation where like you don't have the options that are required for that situation, you that's it. Like it's done. Also, sometimes, well, not even sometimes. Like a lot of the time, Izanagi has to commit. Like I've just said, she burns the options that don't seem relevant to the situation. A lot of the time, like it's not a kind of like, oh, like I'll keep like some cards back just in case this happens or that happens. She demands you to go, right, what's going to happen like 3, 4 turns from now? More than any other goddess, you need to consider, do I burn this Armageddon or do I keep it? Do I burn this battle plan, or is my line of play going to be like battle plan into Sphinx, and that's how I win this match through positive EV damage trades? More than any other goddess, like I've kind of stressed it as best as I possibly can. It's just disclaimer: she is difficult and complicated, and I will explain what I understand about her as best as possible. But this is probably the goddess that I struggled the most with, and I was very frustrated because you can see the power. She is extremely strong, but when you get it wrong, you know that it's your fault. You know that you made a decision. Like in the line of play you just took, you made a mistake. Is it like it's not on her? She's basically just said, look, you're playing on like super hard difficulty mode. We're playing Dance Dance Revolution on super insane difficulty mode. If you misstep, that's not my fault. Like, I'm just capable of playing on this mode. And guess what? Other goddesses struggle on this mode too. That's the thing. You struggle to play on this, but playing against this is also so difficult. So if you're just capable of doing it, you benefit. I mean, we'll just have like a quick similarity, right? But sometimes I like to compare goddesses, or refer back to previous deck descriptions. And in Izanami's deck description, who I also rate as a top 4 goddess, like top tier, I said that part of what makes her so powerful is just that she gives you tactical and strategic options. Of course, Izanagi is exactly the same. She burns the options she doesn't want and keeps the best option, but she enables you to play boards that no other goddess can possibly compete with. Insane mode isn't even the best demonstration of that. I will say, like, by the time we got to Japanese mythology and we'd gotten like a bit of a grip on Izanagi, our win rate was actually 80% in Japanese mythology. It might, like, I could not remember losing more than one match. We might have only lost like one match. She, like, once you like get a bit of a grip on her and you understand, and you just get good at identifying what the best line of play is and take into consideration what your opponent can and can't do. She just takes it to a level that is very difficult to like really stay ahead. For example, like with other goddesses, you might like be considering putting a Sphinx on board, and you're kind of like, okay, well, Sphinx has 40 health. I really need this Sphinx to survive. Can my opponent, like, how much devotion does my opponent generate this turn? Can they generate enough devotion to destroy this Sphinx? And it's kind of like turn by turn, you can do things. But Izanagi instead has to go, right, well, they can. What about if they Zeus Bolt? What am I left with? If I commit fully to this Sphinx and I throw this down on the board, what does my hand look like? What does my future look like? What's the board going to look like in 4 turns? If it's destroyed, what happens? If it stays on the board, what happens? Where is it going to be in 3-4 turns? I mean, I've stressed it enough now. I've been as clear as possible. She gives you tactical and strategic options that no other goddess has. She plays at a level that, like, other goddesses just cannot play on that level. If she wants to beat you in the race, she will beat you in the race. If you can outthink her, though, you will beat Izanagi. So in that way, like, it's amazing. Like, in terms of PvP, it's amazing. Because this is almost like throwing the gauntlet down. Like, if someone's playing Izanagi into you, they either have confidence in their ability to play the game at a high level and outplay you, because that's what Izanagi does. She outplays you. She has the capability of outplaying you. If she beats you and she took the perfect lines and she played at this high level, that is due to gameplay. Like, I think that's actually due to player skill more than a lot of things. Of course, she still has like those BS starts that, like a lot of goddesses are capable of having. But just in general, she demands so much from you that if you win with her, you can kind of pat yourself on the back. And if you beat her, you can pat yourself on the back. Obviously not in insane mode, because the AI doesn't play her very well. Kind of similar to Izanami. Like, don't base the strength of Izanami on how well she's played by the AI in campaign mode, right? You'll get to Japanese mythology and you might play against an Izanami, and there are just some questionable decisions being made. The true power is in PvP. It really is. Like, both of these love to race, and they love to beat you in the race. And in insane mode, with the bonus devotion that the AI gets, that's hard. It's hard for them to fully express their full power. But for all that, I still had an 80% win rate. I still only lost a single match in Japanese mythology once I'd realised just what we're taking on. I don't know, like, how else to describe Izanagi. Like, normally, I'll describe the goddess and then I'll go into the cards, go card by card, and then summarize the deck. And this is definitely a case where I'm going to have to summarize this deck and explain my game plan for Izanagi, because I feel it's very personal to me. I think there are a lot of different ways of playing her. I've seen all sorts. I've seen videos, about Calamity Izanagi. I've seen crazy starts where she immediately throws down Toshogyu shrines, Taikus, all, you know, like I've seen Everflowing Chalice Izanagi, and to be honest, when we originally built an Izanagi deck in Greek mythology, going into that, we were playing like largely an Everflowing Chalice deck, but that didn't work for me. It works for some people, it didn't work for me. So you're gonna have to bear with me because we're going through it. Like we're gonna go through it and summarize it, but this is what works for me for Izanagi. But she most definitely can do a whole bunch of things. She's amazing. She's just highly demanding, you know. Right, so Armageddon, 4 copies. Um, Normally I don't have 4 copies of something, but one of the joys of Izanagi is like it's almost impossible for a hand to get clogged. In so much as, you know, with most goddesses, if you have 4 Armageddons in hand and another random card, it's kind of like, what the hell am I supposed to do with that? You know, you struggle to, like, you can't get rid of them, you can't use them, they're super expensive. Why would you need 4 Armageddons in a match? Like, what sort of hell on earth is that match that you need 4 Armageddons? And what are you supposed to play in the meantime? Like, you can't afford to have 4 Armageddons because you need like the lightweight stuff. You need like the mummies and the phoenix eggs, or the minotaurs, or the medusas, or the, you know, like just anything. I mean, name it, Yukionas, I don't know, Ningyos. You need those things, and having 4 copies increases the chance that you have an Armageddon instead of those things. But Izanagi doesn't get clogged in that way because she sees 4 Armageddons in her hand and goes, fine, well, 3 burn material and an Armageddon. You know, that's not 4 Armageddon to her. That's 12 devotion and an Armageddon. And it's more a question of, okay, well, what's that 5th card? What's the card that I draw next turn? What's the card that I draw the turn after that? But one of the other joys of Izanagi is because her cards equal her devotion in that like cycle of life more directly than anyone else, but her actual base devotion isn't really representative of her overall ability to commit to the board. She is kind of like resistant to stuff like Great Desert and Soul Extraction because, you know, she doesn't bank her devotion as a general rule. You know, her devotion is her cards. She builds up, you know, her hand, and then she just burns her hand. So it is kind of like hard to stop her in that respect. Like you can't slow her down. If she wants to, you know, put out, you know, like a battle plan, she will just burn 2 cards, and you know you can have as many great deserts as you want. If she's got 20 cards in hand, this is irrelevant. It just doesn't matter to you. Yeah. So back to the point anyway. So 4 copies of Armageddon because one, you absolutely, like I've always stressed, right, that this is a panic button and it's a card that you need to have when you need to have it. If you don't have it when you need to have it, you've lost the match. The game is over. But with Izanagi, of course, you can have 4 because that is really just potential resources that you can then commit to something else. In the same way that Izanami, you know, I was saying that you can kind of read her ability as she can pull resources from other areas and she can pay alternate costs. Izanagi has that too. She can pull resources, and you know, instead of reading the cost of something as, you know, say like an Everflowing Sun, instead of reading that as, you know, like 5 devotion, on some level Izanagi can just read that as, yeah, that's 2 burns. That's not devotion, that's just 2 card burns for me. So when is it worth it? When's it not worth it? When is it worth burning the cards? Right, Seaquake, similar. Like you'll notice I haven't got Earthquake. I haven't got Earthquake because you get to Armageddon if you need Armageddon. Earthquake is like this value card a lot of the time. Like if your opponent starts with like double Gleipnir, you know, you kind of like roll your eyes like, okay, well, you know, that's getting Earthquaked, and thank you for all that devotion and the card advantage because it only costs you 1 card, but it costs them 2, arguably. But you know, like Izanagi would rather just pull the reset button, start again, if she's going to do that, and she can do that because she can burn to 26. She doesn't have to kind of like make an economy play at 18. Yeah, but anyway, back to it. So Seaquake, I rarely ever use this. I didn't find it as useful as I normally use it. She certainly got the monuments, and she's certainly useful. And with the mummy, of course, even if she Seaquakes herself, you know, you can still put down the mummies from the grave, and she can still, you know, put in work with it. I thought it'd be a lot more effective than it is because, you know, card slot value is important to her. Card advantage is important to her. She doesn't want to have to play 2 cards if she can only play 1 card, because those are resources she's burning. And if she plays 2 cards, of course, that's 1 burn that she's just lost. But situations just never really arose where I was like, okay, this is a great Seaquake spot. The way to counter Seaquake really is just like put down a monument or 2. 19 devotion. It was okay. She tends to burn to exactly what she needs. She doesn't tend to have like excess boards or massive amounts of devotion generation. It's kind of strange, but she can win the race, but that's not how I tackled it. And this deck doesn't tend to have like, 30, 40 devotion. She's not going to have like crazy boards or gigantic wide boards, She tends to actually go a little bit thinner. And this was always like, Seaquake was always kind of hard for me because I had like a couple of units on the board, maybe a monument or 2. I was generating maybe 11, 12, 13 devotion possibly, like a lot of turns. A lot of turns I was below that. So this was a major sacrifice in terms of like just our banked devotion. But I didn't want to commit, cards to it. I didn't want to burn cards for it either. If I was going to burn a card, this is only 7 more. So this is just 2 card burns. So if I'm at 19, I'll just burn 2 cards. And, like it would have to be amazing. I've still got it because occasionally you do find like ideal situations and Seaquake is absolutely perfect. But strange, like I can only talk about like specific to this deck, but I didn't find it as impressive as I do with other goddesses because Izanagi burns to exactly what she needs, and Seaquake, didn't really like accomplish more than Armageddon in most cases. So I just burnt upwards. But on the other hand, if you're not going to use the Seaquake and you've got the Seaquake and Armageddon in hand, and you just burn upwards to Armageddon, Seaquake is one of those cards. So swings and roundabouts. I don't really know. Like, play it yourself, perhaps. Try it out yourself. But in terms of like purely Izanagi, I wasn't over the moon. Great Desert. Yeah, let's just talk about Soul Extractions, Great Deserts here, yeah? I've already said, but Izanagi, if she wants to win a race, she can win a race. But I found that because what you're doing from a turn-to-turn basis is you have to make decisions about your best course of action. One of the things that was most helpful for me was the ability to slow down the game, control the game. I like this anyway. Like Great Desert and Soul Extraction are useful cards in any deck. Like I have them in almost all my decks, to be honest. Almost all of my runs have these 2 cards in. But with Izanagi, it's not so much just like devotion denial or, like staying on top of your opponent, refusing to let them, bring out their bombs, just trying to keep them under control. It's about when I burn my resources and decide to take a course of action, I burn my ability to take other courses of action. I burn my ability to exercise other options that I have. So a lot of the time with Izanagi, even though I could win the race, I chose not to. I opted out and instead I put down a Great Desert or a Phoenix Egg or a Mummy. Something either low commitment or that slows the game down a little bit. And I kind of sat back and I just said, okay, look, it's turn 1. I don't know what you do. I don't know what you've got. I don't know how you play. I can't decide what option I'm supposed to pick. I don't want to make a big move. I don't want to burn something here. I don't want to lose any options. I'm just going to put this down, slow down the game, get a general idea of what's happening and how you want to develop and what your hand looks like. And then once I've gained some information, I can then proceed with my plan. I can then decide what the best course of action is. So I actually found like a lot of the time I was opting out of the race, even though I could win. Instead, I just said, right, I'm going to see what you do. Are you immediately going to slam down like Identry, Gleipnir? Yeah, and just like, are you going to throw down 3 pyramids and suddenly be developing 21 devotion a turn? What exactly do you have in your hand? How are you going to approach this? If they don't put anything down, that tells me a lot. If they immediately manage to max out their devotion, I start going, okay, I've got the desert down, so we're going to slow this game just a little bit. What do I need? If they've just put down triple pyramid, I'm looking for this Armageddon, yeah? I know that if I'm going Great Desert, do I have Armageddon? If I don't have Armageddon, I know that my best move is Taisha. If I don't have Taisha, okay, I'm going to try and put Mummy down, slow it down even more, try and get some positive EV trades, buy some time. Everflowing Sun as well. Like, have I got the Everflowing Suns? But it's about I'm trying to see what you do so that I then know what my best course of action is. Because it is so easy as Izanagi to make a mistake. If you burn the wrong option, you go the wrong way, that's it, you've thrown the game. It's kind of I don't know. Like I said, there are so many different ways of playing her, and honestly, the most intuitive way of playing her is just to go. Well, look, I can literally burn 3 cards and start my turn 1 on 15 devotion, slam down a Fushimi and an Itsukushima, and say, look, like you can't beat that turn 1. There is no goddess that can really compete with Izanagi in that respect, you know. Battle plan, win condition. I've always felt this is kind of a win condition for me. In this deck, I've gone Sphinx. Originally, I went for like this Everflowing Chalice, as I said, and so it's like Ningyo, Fujin. You know what? I'll just bring them out. I'll just quickly bring them out. But when I dropped the Everflowing Chalice, I was like, well, what exactly is this now accomplishing? Is this the best choice for me? Ningyo is obviously the 4/4. It's vicious, but it's only at 30, and that is noticeable. Um, wow, where is Fujin? Oh, yeah, Fujin, is a 5/3, so it's slightly less effective, but it's got the 40 health. Sphinx has the 4/4 of Ningyo, but also the tankiness of Fujin. And since I wasn't going Japanese mythology, and I just kind of felt like, like Everflowing Chalice was like a bit of a trap for me personally. And just because Izanagi is Japanese, why am I playing Japanese cards? Like, there's nothing about her that actually says you have to play Japanese cards. It makes no sense. Sphinx was better. For a single point more than Ningyo, I get 10 extra health, which gets me to the critical, like, breakpoint of 40 health. And Ningyo gives you 5 devotion a turn, Sphinx gives you 6. So I just felt this kind of like, this was the best of both worlds. Like, get rid of the Fujin, get rid of the Ninkyo. I'm not Japanese anymore. As far as I can work out, like Izanagi actually likes Egyptian cards, but she can play any mythology. I mean, of course she can play a mix too. But as I was trying to work out what to do after Greek mythology, because I wasn't happy with the deck, I found like a legit Greek mythology deck, like I could play a legit Egyptian mythology deck, like all 4 mythologies, like Izanagi can play. And I just found like Battle Plan Sphinx was a large part of my win conditions in Greek mythology, combined with natural tankiness, a little bit more devotion. It was just like a fantastic upgrade. If I was letting go of Everflowing Chalice, of course. Everflowing Sun. Just to quickly talk about the maths here. You make a small loss on Everflowing Sun if you use it, right? Insomuch as if you burn the card, that's 4 devotion. If you play the card, it costs 5 to play, and then you get 2 cards. If you burn them, that's 8. So 8 minus 5 is 3 devotion. So you make a small loss on Everflowing Sun over just burning the card in the first place. But you have 4 copies. Why do you have that? Because as I said, Izanagi decides from turn to turn what her best course of action is, and she burns other options. Everflowing Sun, like the joy of having more cards in your hand, to a large degree, it's just the ability to have more options. And Izanagi just needs that ability to pick and choose exactly what route she's going to take through this match. Like, options doesn't always just mean like, oh, like I'm going to go for Armageddon, or you know what, I think we can fight this board. I'm going to go Battle Plan Sphinx and try and value trade. Sometimes it's a matter of, with more cards in hand, you can go, okay, now that like with these options, if I combine them together, I can kind of soul extract Mummy for 6, and then I hold back the Great Desert. And then if they aren't developing well into the next like 2 turns, I can then start looking into value trading with the Sphinx. But if, like, even after the soul extraction, they manage to get back fast, and I find that, like, the devotion I'm getting from the mummy isn't quite enough, I can lead into Great Desert to slow them down until I get my Armageddon. Like, the line of play isn't just like A or B. You know, it's, do I go A, B, C, or do I go A, C, D, or something? And Everflowing Sun is just about giving you A, B, C, D instead of just before you have the card A and B. You know, and Izanagi does need that. Uh, she's so it's so hard to like really explain her. I'm trying my best. I really am. Like, I literally just finished Japanese mythology. We got enough of a grasp on her to explain it, but I do feel like this is genuinely the goddess that will take some game time. Like, it takes experience really to get to her and understand her. Soul extraction. I've already talked about this with Great Desert. You know, time reflow. I normally have 3 copies. You know, the concern normally is just that you end up with like 4 copies of time reflow in your hands, and you're kind of like, but there's nothing in the grave, nothing to do with them. Yeah, they're just taking up card slots that could be used on something else. I mean, the same as, you know, with 4 copies of Armageddon. You should do this. Like, I was at some point considering just keeping the deck like straight and maybe like taking out the deserts for 4 Seaquakes and just making it ×4, because Izanagi doesn't have the problems that most people do with her hand clumping up. And, you know, like time reflow, if that situation happens to you and you've got 3 time reflows in hand but they're just not useful to you, you burn them. You burn these resources so that you can then do something else. It's not a problem for you, so you might as well have 4, because when you burn them, they don't go to the grave. You can't get them back. You can't use them, of course. They're just gone, you know, for the entire match. You know, they are burnt. They're not sent to the grave or anything. So early in the match, a lot of the time, you will burn your time reflows because they have no value to you. There's nothing in the grave yet. This is often like a fast burn for you. You'll easily burn this to put a mummy on the board because that's 2 devotion a turn. If the mummy's going to survive 3 turns, you're making your money back. That's an easy. That's with no hesitation. But the truth of the matter is, as it gets to the late game, you still need time reflow. So this is one of those things with Izanagi where actually you do kind of want like ×4s because she doesn't have any of the setbacks from having ×4s like clogging up your hands. But if she burn, like, you do actually need those cards. So, but just not at that point in the game. Yeah, you can't keep them as a general rule. You need to burn. You need to keep just throwing the, like, skimming the fat away. You pick your option, and all other options that you feel are inferior to that option get burnt in order for you to enforce your option as strongly as possible. Taisha, again, not even in Izanagi, but just in general, like, Taisha doesn't really get clumped in the hands. I do feel like you always need digging, though. The ability to cycle cards, look for your options, look for that Armageddon, you know, whatever you need, like, Taisha helps you with it. And it does have like that great synergy with Mummy, where you discard the Mummy, and but you haven't actually like effectively discarded the Mummy. This is super important with Izanagi because you can discard the Mummy, of course, and draw a card. Izanagi likes having lots of cards in her hands and likes having lots of options in her hands. So this is a little bit more valuable. Like, I might as well just go from this into Mummy. Like, I've already talked about the interaction, but right. I think Mummy is already like a great card. Like, I have this in like all of my decks almost because I just think like the value is so great. I've already talked about this, but you know, you put this down for 4 devotion. It's just like this chump blocker, just this chaff that your opponent has to get through. It is very hard to attack. You know, like, attack twice for most units. You know, like, even take the Sphinx for example, which is a great attacker. Would have to attack twice, so that's 8 devotion to destroy a 4 devotion. So you just make like these little gains, these little plus EV moves. Your opponent destroys it, you just throw it right back. Slowly, you just grind them out of the game. But it's even more useful for Izanagi because she actually really appreciates something that she can play that isn't in her hand. Because every time she plays something from her hand, that's something she can't burn. So she values this card more than an average goddess, and an average goddess already thinks this card is great, as far as I'm concerned. But with Izanagi, this is like a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10. It's already so good. But it's actually surprising. Once they go in your graveyard and you have the capability of playing them without playing like and just letting your hand build and making moves on the board, suddenly you are playing a mid to late game Izanagi that has 4 to 5 cards in hand, and 5 cards is 20 devotion that you can pull out at any time whatsoever. If the situation isn't great, then you keep that potential in your hand. Yeah, you keep those 5 cards in your hand. But if you like have like a battle plan down and a Sphinx, so the Sphinx is now like free to attack, then that 20 is an extra. Well, I mean, let's be honest here. That 20 that you can just burn is 6 attacks, so that's 60 damage that you're holding in your hand, and your opponent can't really like I said, like can't extract it, can't remove it, can't destroy it. So the mummy buys you this ability in the late game. And Izanagi is very, very scary in the late game because if she's got 4 to 5 cards in hand, there are very few things that are actually scarier than Izanagi. She can just pull 20 devotion out of nowhere. If she wants to attack, like, this is on, like, of course, like, this is 20 devotion on top of what you've already got on the board. And, you know, like, you've got a Sphinx on board, you've got an Izanagi board, and you've got a battle plan on board. So you've already got 12 devotion. If that is all you've got on board, you've got 12, plus the 20 in your hand is 32. So she's got 32 devotion to play with from 12, effectively, if she wants. If she needs to explode, or you make a mistake and there's a lethal and you don't realise it, with 32 devotion and a Sphinx that's at 3 per 10, are you crazy? Like, that's insane. That is honestly insane. Like, that is 100 damage very easily. You know, like, she is very scary in the late game, and a large part of that is, okay, well, you need your early game to enable your late game, because there are a few things that are less scary in a late game than Izanagi with no cards. You know, like, if she makes the mistake, this is one of the things, right? As I was saying, like, she's complicated, and if you make a mistake, you're done. Izanagi in a late game with no cards is a joke. It's not scary at all. She can't do anything. So you need to find like these little ways in the early game of just finding excuses or ways of not playing cards if you can get away with it. And Mummy allows you to do that. Oh, I just find myself so lacking in trying to explain Izanagi. I really am trying to do the best I am. You know, like, if someone can explain it better, please put out a deck description. This is the one goddess that I've gone through campaign with, and still I'm just like trying to explain it, trying to get the mechanics through. It's hard. Sphinx, yeah, win condition, battle plan Sphinx. I think Sphinx itself is absolutely amazing. Phoenix Egg, right. There are many, many reasons that Phoenix Egg is super useful to Izanagi. One, it costs free, and her base devotion is free. Occasionally in games, I would just put down a Phoenix Egg, and that's it for my turn 1. And then I would say, okay, well, you know, I still need to see what option you're going for. And this is a very low commitment option. As a general rule, I am a fan of Phoenix Egg. Just, you know, it costs almost nothing. If your opponent attacks it, you make that devotion gain, similar to Mummy. But at the same time, unlike Mummy, like, your opponent can just decide not to attack this. Like, this is something that, you know, like, you're like, oh no, like, I've got to get to that. I can't let it turn into a Phoenix. It turns into a win condition for you if your opponent doesn't do anything about it. And I found, like, a turn 1 Phoenix Egg, if your opponent starts slow, you get the win condition. If your opponent starts fast, it's just chaff, and it'll give you a little bit of an EV bump while you're trying to get to your board clears. You know, if you've accepted that they've just like hit the ground running and they've got the perfect hand. It is very strange. It felt weird to begin with, like playing Izanagi and just going, yeah, okay, look, my turn 1 is going to be a Phoenix Egg. That's it, your turn. Like, that's weird. But it makes more and more, like, it just makes more and more sense. As I went along, I kind of just realised, like, well, don't commit, don't burn anything until you know what you're supposed to burn. You don't know anything on turn 1. You know nothing about anything. So put the Phoenix Egg down. Secondly, in a similar way, you know, like, Armageddon Phoenix Egg is very, very common because you clear the entire board, your opponent's got nothing, you've got nothing, you start everything all over again, and now they're in this conundrum where they're back to base devotion, you've got a Phoenix Egg on the other side of the board, and, you know, I mean, you can't play Armageddon like turn 2. They've set up a board, like otherwise you wouldn't even be using it. They've set up a board, they've used a lot of their cheap options, their starter cards, you know, the things that just get them going. You Armageddon, and do they even have enough cheap units to like work their way to the Phoenix Egg? Because even if like you Armageddon and they've still got, say, 5-10 devotion banked for their turn, the cards they've got in their hand, like if you put down a Sphinx here, the Sphinx is a bit too slow to actually move to the egg as a general rule. But also, like, they could afford the Sphinx, but they still need to move 6 squares to reach the Phoenix Egg. So they might, you know, if you've thrown all your cheap options away, you can't like build towards it step by step. In the way that, you know, like the reason that like building towards something is valuable, because of course if you like, you know, put down a mummy and use that as a stepping stone, because you can then put the next mummy like in the adjacent square moving towards your opponent. As you like build this, you know, this bridge of permanence, it develops devotion for you, of course. Whereas this Sphinx, like, your opponent could move this Sphinx, but the problem is they haven't developed anything. Like, do they really want to invest in moving a Sphinx 6 squares and then attacking once on a Phoenix Egg that costs 3 devotion? Develop nothing on their board after an Armageddon. They can't do it. It's too difficult. So your opponent's in this awkward situation after an Armageddon where they don't have enough cheap options to like build towards you and, you know, like build the board up. So they either stay at home basically and the Phoenix Egg pops, or they move, but, you know, like movement in some ways is often like wasted devotion. There needs to be an efficient outcome at the end that justifies the movement. And, you know, you'll be surprised like how often this happens, but it's super, super effective. So yeah, back to like just like a deck summary. I've gone through the cards. You can get like the general idea of this, right? There are a lot of ways of playing Izanagi, but for me personally, I just felt like I wasn't really capable of seeing, you know, like, oh, I'm playing Odin, like this is the correct option. Until I had more information, I didn't want to like commit to anything. And Izanagi is all about choosing your option and then committing to it. So this deck was largely built just around slowing my opponent down with like these little cheap options, these things that aren't really much of a commitment on the board. And then see, you know, like, how does my opponent start? Do they have a bad hand, good hand? Do they start fast? Is it slow? It's very, very easy to go to like grow from Phoenix to Mummy to Battle Plan to Sphinx. 4 turns. If your opponent messes up, all it takes is you putting down a Phoenix Egg turn 1, seeing their turn 2. How much devotion do they have left? What did they put down? If they maxed out their devotion, you can expect them to start faster. So maybe Phoenix Egg into Mummy, into Battle Plan, into Sphinx isn't correct. But if they start slow, Battle Plan Sphinx is one of your win conditions. And if you can get the Sphinx on the board without their ability to take it off the board immediately, just in terms of like battle value, or, you know, damage value, whatever you want to call it, right? Every turn that a Sphinx is on the board, it generates value for you. Every time it removes something from the board with a battle plan on, it generates value, more and more value. So this is just kind of how I tackled it, is the capability of going, okay, look, I'm going to put a mummy down, Phoenix Egg, a Taisho to dig. I'll see what you're going to do. And then I either tend to go in 2 directions. You started bad, it's go time. Phoenix, battle plan, maybe a Great Desert just to keep you down, or the soul extractions. I'm going for you. I'm going straight for you. I'm going to like run at you. You started bad, I'm going to run at you. If you, again, like the other route is of course Phoenix Egg. Oh, you started well? Okay, well, I'm going to Taisho to dig. I'm going to commit very little to the board. Generate like maybe 8, 9, 10 devotion a turn. The 2-3 turns that you take building, I'm going to work towards my Armageddon. clear the board. Let's see you do that again. Let's see you do that again. It's that simple. So I tried to make it as simple as possible because she's very complicated. It's either go forwards or go backwards. You start bad, I'm going to run at you. You start well, I'm going to aim for the reset. And it's a race. Can you get to me before I can get to you? Can you stop me from generating this devotion before I get to Armageddon? And if I'm committing very little to the board and my hand is building up, Armageddon isn't that far away. Like, even from 10, 14, 16 devotion, that's nothing. That's like 3-4 cards for Izanagi. That's 3-4 cards plus the Armageddon plus the Phoenix Egg or the Mummy. And the board starts, but you know, now you've got a Phoenix Egg on it, and your opponent goes, oh, really? Yeah, that's my general battle plan for Izanagi anyway. That's what I did. It's overly simplistic because I'm just too incompetent, too much of an idiot to be able to play her well. But it does get you through insane mode. This is good enough to like get through insane mode. Smash it. Definitely like check out Japanese mythology if you want to see how it plays. There's no point looking at Greek mythology because I had to change a lot about this deck. I realised I was just wrong about a lot of things. So definitely check out Japanese mythology for kind of once I'd finally gotten a grip on her. Yeah, best of luck though. She is hard.